Welcome back to my studio. I am Jessica Henry, and this is session 2, lesson number 1 of our watercolor session. I would like to begin this watercolor session by talking about some of the classical Victorian masters that we enjoy looking at. I believe our earliest recollection of Victorian watercolors, which we may not even be aware of, was through our Mother Goose children's books. I've included just a few examples of those paintings that by Blanche Fisher-Wright. She is one of the classical greats, and just laying down washes of color over color. In this passage with the boy with the umbrella, we see a wash of blues and pinks and yellows in the foreground. She didn't mess with them. She laid down one single wash and just did another one over the top of that. And we're going to be talking about all of those different features as we get into painting, and all of that will make a lot more sense. In this Blanche Fisher-Wright painting of the goose with the two children, again, it's the same idea of just a simple color with another color laid over the top of that. So what we're dealing with is just a basic drawing done concerning ourselves with composition and value arrangement, places of lights and darks next to each other. And then the actual process of painting is done with very clean, simple washes, and I will show you how to do those. And I'll also show you some of my own works that I've done over the years. This is a watercolor painting I did. I began this plein air. I was drawing these trees out down by a little pond, and I loved the moss, and I loved how this tree root just twisted and had these marvelous features, the way that it grew with the bark. And I wanted to show those things, not just with the pencil and not just with watercolor paint, but also with pen and ink. And so we are going to be doing one lesson in pen and ink, and that will be an extra one that we're adding on. I did 26 illustrations for a children's book written by J.R.R. Tolkien. These were all done from my imagination, and ultimately that is something that we're going to be talking about more of as the years go by with Renaissance Creative Arts. And this is another one. Just calling your focus into some of these building up of the colors and leading the eye through the painting and back that way, using all of these elements of drawing to create that composition. And same thing with this one. You can get some of these rich, beautiful, dark tones in here with broken color. I'm also going to address what dry brush is and some of these different terms that we use and what they all mean. You can add multiple figures to your landscapes, and this is one that I did. Again, these are all from my imagination, but once you learn and you become more adept at drawing figures and people, you can do things more along this line where you start adding figures and complexities to your picture. And this was the first illustration from that book by Tolkien. It's about the little dog, and that's a wizard. And this one I did, and I drew inspiration from a master copy watercolor I had done during my atelier years. And this is that master copy watercolor painting. And I loved that yellow sky with the pale sun and those trees just simply painted, nice, strong vertical lines. And this composition in here just had this lovely open feeling here. And the scene was going on in here, but it didn't take up too much of the rectangle. And then the way that these lines led the eye to the girl just kept this whole focus right in here. I would like to begin this session by just talking about the materials that we need to do our watercolors. So the first thing you need to do is to get your watercolor paper, and there are so many questions about what is hot press, what's cold press, what is rough, what is 140 pound, and so forth. So I want to address those first before we get into all the other materials. So let's talk about paper. I prefer to buy my paper in blocks like this because I find it just easier if I want to go do plein air with watercolors. It's already all together. I have done the big sheets, and this was done on, this is 300 pound hot pressed. And I will show you what these textures look like, the different surfaces and why they're different. So this is, I begin with hot pressed, 300 pound hot pressed. So these papers here are glued together on all four sides except for one little part right here where they're not glued. And you just slipped a little X-Acto knife in there and you just pry them apart carefully. So you don't have to soak your paper, tape it down, you don't have to stretch anything. All of that's already done, which makes it really simple. And I will explain what that means to stretch your paper later. And so blocks of paper make it really easy. This is my plein air watercolor backpack. It's much smaller than oil painting. And inside here I have my little notebook, sketchbook, just nice little leather bound. There aren't lines on it. It's not a journal. It's just the blank paper. And here then I have my other block of watercolor paper. It's a smaller one. This one is 140 pound, but it's 7 by 10 inches. And there's 20 sheets in one of these. And this one is cold pressed. Okay? So what that means is in the process of it, they do a colder pressing on this, and it creates more of a tooth to the surface of the paper. So this is a piece of that cold pressed 140 pound. And you can see from this painting on this side, these are just sketches, quick sketches I've done. But on the surface of there, you'll see a little bit more tooth. And a lot of people like painting on cold press because when they do a wash, the pigments settle into the tooth of the paper a little bit more than with the hot pressed. So the hot pressed, people tend to not, if they like the cold press, they don't like the hot press because the pigments seem to slide on the paper a little bit more. And this is an example of that. So this is from my larger block of paper, just sketches. And this one I did with the hot pressed. And you can see here how there's some pigmentation where the paint just settles on and it doesn't seem to have that nice flow. So that's what hot press. I prefer hot press because I can kind of use that to my advantage if I want some of that texture, which I did like it back there on these trees in the distance. And I do like some of that down and around here where the leaves are. I prefer hot press also because I do my watercolors very detailed. Those pictures that I'd shown you of the children, I couldn't have got that teeny detail on cold pressed because it's too much tooth. And so when I want to get in there and do some of these finer details like around his beak and his eye, and again, some of these little teeny tiny children in here, I mean, you can see with my finger how little they are. That's really small. And I couldn't have got that if I had just done cold press. So this is hot press. And now, where do we get the name 300, 450 pound, 90 pound, what's okay to paint on? I prefer the heavier paper. The way that they do that is on a 22 by 30 inch stack of watercolor paper. A ream is 500 sheets. So they take a ream of 500 sheets and they weigh it. If it weighs 300 pound, the paper is obviously it's called 300 pound and it's thicker stock. 140 pounds, then they're thinner sheets. 140 pound is thinner. 300 pound, of course, is a thicker, heavier stock, and you can get it even thicker than that. Art stores typically don't go bigger and thicker than that. You get about, for watercolor paper, it's most of the weight is 140 pound to 300 pound. 90 pound I wouldn't even go with. 150 pound is iffy, but I don't mind it if it's already all glued down. What you have to do, and when I referred to stretching your paper earlier, what you have to do for that, and you may want to do this if you buy it in sheets, is you take the sheet of paper, and if it's a big sheet and you want to do a very large painting, put it in your bathtub. Put about that much water in your tub, cold water is fine, and leave your paper in there to soak for about 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, you lift it out vertically, kind of drip it off, and then you're going to lay it on a bunch of paper towels on your board that you're going to be painting on. Just a piece of masonite is fine. Lay it on your paper towels on there, and don't rub it because you will agitate the surface of your paper, but you dab it with a paper towel all the way across. Just dab it, and you can dab both sides. And then you take your white artist tape and you carefully tape all the way around it and you let it dry. And that gets the glue and the sizing off if you're going to do a large work. So that's how you stretch it. You can do that with even smaller pieces of paper if you want. You can stretch a large sheet, stretch it, and then take it off the tape and cut it into smaller sizes if you want. I don't always do that. It's up to you. It just depends on what you're interested in doing with that. So, more on that in subsequent years. I want to talk a little bit more about supplies that you're going to need. So to get your watercolor paper set up, you will tape it down to a board. And I have here just a 1/4 inch board, and I have a piece of watercolor paper taped to it. Okay? So that is your initial setup. I will show you then in the video how I'm going to set this up to begin our first assignment. As far as other supplies, I recommended that you buy Praying brand. If you just want a really simple, quick quality, they're actually really good quality paints, and this is what my kids have used. But you can take this whole palette out, just pop it out and pop out the colors you don't want, or leave them all in. But their primary colors in here are very similar to what we will use in our palettes. Your cad red, or your red, is very much like a cadmium red deep. We're going to use the yellow, which I popped out. It's very much like a cadmium yellow. And then ultramarine blue, your blue it's just like an ultramarine. So if you can only find this, get this. This will work just fine. I prefer and have used over the years the Winsor Newton watercolor tubes of paint. You can buy these palettes. These are very easy to find. You can get plastic or ceramic. You can get metal. Depends if you want to take it out in the field. I would recommend plastic. It's lighter weight. I have had little ones like this in metal, and they're just fine too, but I wouldn't use the ceramic for going out doing plein airs. So this is my palette, and I haven't cleaned it, which I love about watercolor because it just sits there, and you can activate that yellow or this yellow or whatever and still use it again. So this is my palette, and here's that yellow I was missing. So this is the way I set things up, and what I do for filming in classes, I write down on my palette, and you can do this too if you want, just to keep track of what your colors are. I write down just in little black Sharpie what they are there. So what I have on here, I put Chinese white up here. It's out of the way. I don't use it very often, so I really don't want it in the middle of what I'm doing. This is cad yellow light, and this is cadmium yellow medium, yellow ochre, cadmium red light, scarlet. Now you don't need all of these. I'm just showing you what I have. Cadmium red medium, burnt sienna, and believe it or not, these two down here are other shades of burnt sienna. If you buy different brands, they can often be slightly different. So those are those. This is Rose Madder, and this is alizarin crimson. Down here I have phthalo green, cerulean blue. This is indigo. I also have it up here, two different, slightly different shades. I don't know why I have them separate, whatever. Cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, dioxanine purple, and ivory black. This is indigo again. So that's what I have. What I'm going to recommend that you have, if you do choose to do one like this, the colors that I recommend that you actually get. You're going to want cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, cadmium red, burnt sienna, alizarin crimson, phthalo green, ultramarine blue. Those are your essentials. Now you can also pick up Chinese white, dioxanine purple, cadmium red deep, burnt umber, cobalt blue, indigo, Rose Madder, and cerulean blue. This is exactly what I have on my palette. And then I also include this yellow from the Praying set, which would be a cadmium yellow light. So I just keep all of my paints in a Ziploc baggie. I find it very useful, and I can just throw them in my plein air bag. And I fold up my palette and keep that off to the side. More things that I had in my plein air bag and other materials that I use. So I keep a jar with me, and this is, if I want to go out in the field, then I have it. I can just fill it up with water and dump it out when I'm done. Inside here I do have my little bottle of Higgins black ink. If I do want to do some pen and inking, you can get brown, which I prefer brown, but black is good too. You can add a little bit of water to it to dilute it. I have a natural sponge in here. I used to bring along an entire roll of toilet paper, but found that this is just smaller, it takes up less space, easier to use. You just wring it out and you'll be wiping your brush off on this. This is my other jar. I have several jars of water or glasses or whatever just to have on hand while you're working. And I like the lids too, in case I do want to travel with it. The lid is handy. Artist tape. You need white artist tape. And I always have a scissors handy for cutting it because I like to cut my edges just for proper draftsmanship. Looks cleaner and tidier. When you're mentally clean and tidy, you tend to paint that way. So. And again, I will be using clear rulers and things. It's like Dan had mentioned in our perspective video. Using clear enables you to see through it so you can see a little bit more of your lines better. I have a roll of paper towels over here. I'll be using those. I have a collapsible water holder for in the field. This is nice. You just scrunch it together and then it's really small in your backpack. You want to keep a few sketchbooks, journals, notebooks. We will do one extra week in this watercolor session. We said 3, but we're going to throw in a 4th. Dan is going to teach that one on pen and ink illustration, so we're really excited to be adding that. So that being said, I do have my ink holder here, and of course I like to collect pretty things, so I found this and I just thought it was lovely. That's my ink well, and this is this way so you can set your ink pen on it like such. And when you buy the pen tips, they come in cute, you can get them in cute little containers like this. And Dan is going to show a little bit of this, but also with the pens that you can buy that do not require ink. Some people like those, some people like these, so we thought, let's do a variety. So that's that. I'm going to talk about brushes here. Now, there's all kinds of different schools of thoughts on brushes. And I have this nifty little holder that I use in the field when I take my brushes out. In the studio, you can just get, little, whatever, bamboo cups, coffee cups with broken handles, whatever you need to hold your brushes. All right, I have a couple of them here. I have it's like a sushi roll-up thing here. And then I have this canvas one that is my favorite. And what I have here, and this is what I would take out in the field. In this little pocket, I'll begin with, I have my eraser and a teeny little pencil sharpener. Is that not the smallest little pencil sharpener you've ever seen? As you know, I like to shave my pencil leads back like this, which encourage you to have a more delicate touch. If you don't want to haul around the pencil sharpener like this, that you need to sharpen these kinds of pencils, you stick your pencil in, and you go around and around and around, and that sharpens just the point. Or you can bring along your little sandpaper block and do this. It fits in there too. I like to just throw in this little tiny one. You just do this, and your little point is sharpened, all that you need. So I keep that in here. All right, so I have my collection of pencils here, and for watercolor painting, you want to keep your pencil lines really light. So I just use a 4H. Someone had asked how I avoid getting graphite mixed in with my watercolors when I paint over it, and the answer to that is using a 4H or a light H pencil. It's just lighter and it doesn't have a loose graphite quality. So this is my X-Acto knife for sharpening those pencils like that. You can always just bring a regular pencil sharpener as well. That would fit in this little pocket. And then I have my tiny, tiny brushes. Believe it or not, I will pen and ink using brushes sometimes too, because I can get a varied line thickness. Sometimes a thick line, sometimes a thin line. Or if I want to pen and ink with a color other than the ink that I brought. Sometimes when I'm inking, I will want a green line around something or whatever, and I'll use these tiny, tiny brushes. These are my pen and ink brushes. This one's called mapping. It's a mapping brush. Or pen tip. It just means it's extremely tiny. And I have a couple of pen tips here. They're different sizes. This one is a Hunt number 513 size, and it fits in your pen tip like that. All right, now I have a few synthetic brushes in here, and those are okay just to have on hand, but I prefer to paint with the Kolinsky Sable. Winsor Newton makes a Series 7 that are the top of the line. This is a Grumbacher. It is Kolinsky Sable. It's a size 6 round, and I will be using this most of the time. You want to buy the best quality brushes that you can afford. If you cannot afford the Kolinsky Sables, which range about $100 a brush, some are less, and it depends on, you may be able to find them on sale or on Amazon. But you can get, Winsor Newton makes a blend, a synthetic and sable blend, which is a good version. You can also get squirrel hairs. You can get, these are Sumi brushes, and I will be showing you a little bit of Sumi painting, and that you can get different sizes for those. These two are synthetic, but I like these to have as big mops to wash a large area. So I recommend having at least one big brush, at least one or two good sable or natural bristles. You can have some cheap synthetic ones just to have on hand. I do have some smaller ones I recommend, and make sure that you have your pencils handy. All right, I want to take a few moments before we jump in and talk about some books that I've found to be very useful and very instrumental in my development as a watercolor painter. Of course, we've all pretty much started with Mother Goose, Blanche Fisher Wright. We have also are very familiar with Beatrix Potter, and then Cecilia Mary Barker with the Flower Fairies. I also wanted to introduce you to, if you're not already familiar with the Edwardian lady, this is Edith Holden, and she was a Victorian watercolorist, and she would often do nature study, just filling notebooks and sketchbooks with just sketches of things that she finds out in nature. And these are delightful to just go through, and she'd write poetry or copy poems by famous poets. Another watercolor artist living is Bev Doolittle, and she is famous for her watercolor. I had mentioned Sumi painting, and this one you can find at just Barnes & Noble, anywhere. Just Chinese brush painting, it's called, but they're in one single stroke type painting. And we're going to get into this in year 3 of watercolor painting with the Renaissance Academy. But this is something where it requires tremendous forethought and careful, slow planning, because with Sumi painting, it's about one single stroke, and not just the positive space, but the negative space, and what you leave in the painting to make that have wonderful sense of balance and harmony. So this book I recommended on our Facebook page, but I also recommend for you to pick up this book by Mario Robinson. He's a friend from out east. He is considered a living master by the Art Renewal Center, and he's members with the Sal McGundy Club and all kinds of, he's done a lot of stuff. Check out his credentials, they are very impressive. Anyway, Mario Robinson, Lessons in Realistic Watercolor. And I call it Victorian watercolor. It's typically just realistic. In this book, he covers everything you need to know about watercolor painting, watercolor materials, how to stretch your paper, why to stretch it, your studio setup, and you'll love the way he writes. He writes just with this eloquent, easy to read, but just graceful. So I can't say enough good about it. Get this book. It's seriously, I just saw one on Amazon used for $14. So 17 new on Amazon, but you'll get an idea for some of these. These are his paintings on the back, and they're watercolors. So I like his approach. It's very pragmatic, very simple, step by step, and I'm going to teach you I will echo some of what he goes into in much more detail in this. So over the years, we're going to be getting more of an in-depth look into watercolors, but I'm going to just show you a very, very simple way to begin the approach, very much like Blanche Fisher Wright in the Mother Goose pictures, just simple layer upon layer. So let's get going. All right, so what I'm going to show you right now is when you get your worksheet off the Rafa member page, you'll have your worksheets that you can print out. One of them will be a circle with different division lines and a sun ray in the middle. That is going to be a color wheel. So you're going to print that out, and obviously you can't paint right on that. So what I'm going to show you here is how to transfer that drawing onto your watercolor paper. What I have here is a piece of tissue paper taped right over that drawing. So make sure everything is taped down. Your drawing, tape it to the table, and then tape your tissue paper over the top of that. So then you're going to take just a B pencil. So then you're going to take a B pencil and you're going to trace over every line very carefully. And it's not necessary that you trace over the numbers, but if you want to write them down on your watercolor paper, you certainly can do that. So you're going to go over every single line like this, as well as these, every line that you have here. Then you're going to take this paper, flip it over, and just off to the side, you're going to go back over those lines again. So go over all of the lines on the back side. What you're doing here essentially is you are applying graphite to the back side of the drawing, like this. Oops, make sure you go exactly on the lines. And if you want to use a ruler to help you get the straight lines, you certainly may. If you're not that worried about it, just whatever will be fine. Then you're going to take and you're going to flip it over now. Bring my scratch paper over here as an example. You're going to go over these lines like this. Place it, tape it down to your watercolor paper, and then right on the lines from your beginning, you're going to go over them again. And this will push the pattern through your watercolor, onto your watercolor paper. So go over all the lines all over again. And then your image will show up on your watercolor paper. So that will be on your paper. And then what you're going to do, you can get a harder pencil like an H. This is a 4H. You can go back over all the lines. I drew mine on here with a Sharpie so that it'd be easier for you to see and also print out. All right, so what I'm going to demonstrate here is the color wheel. Now, as you're working with watercolors, you need to wake up your colors. They're all sleeping. So we're going to take some water on a large mop brush like this, and I'm going to just put some color in every one of these. I may not use them all, but I want to just get them fresh. And this just makes them ready to go into once you're ready to paint with those particular colors. So we're going to start at the top. Now, if you're using the Praying watercolor set, this will work really well for you too. Just go with the red, and what you do is you make a nice puddle here of water. Use your brush. I am just going to use for this demo my size 6 sable brush. Okay, so you make a puddle on your palette with plenty of water and plenty of pigment. And so what I have here is a mixture. I'm just picking red, and I'm going to start with, in square number 1, so you're going to draw your line across the top of your area that you're going to paint. It's going to be a nice and juicy puddle. Let's get lots of water on there. Essentially, all you're doing with watercolor painting is you're dragging this puddle down. Now, you can't work slowly because what happens is you get a water break in your wash. But we're going to demonstrate this entire, I'm going to demonstrate this entire color wheel by showing you how to do washes, and I'm going to talk about color as well. So in square number 1, we're doing the first color of the primary colors of the color wheel, red. So we're dragging this puddle all the way down. You get down to the bottom, wipe your brush off. You can rinse it off too. Wipe it off, and you're going to, with the dry point of your brush, suck up that puddle. But leave your paper up so that the water from what you just worked with can flow back into that area that you just painted. And that's a wash. So I'm going to leave that red on my palette, and I'm going to get into square number 2 down here, and this is going to be yellow. So I'm just going to take this cadmium yellow medium, lots of water. We want this to be nice and rich. So primary colors are made up of red, yellow, and blue. So blue is going to be our next. So that's a nice, let's get that even bigger because that's a pretty nice size square. So we're going to start at the top, just going to drag this puddle down, just like this. And dragging that into place. And what I like about these sable brushes is that they hold a lot of color, pigment and water in the bristles, in the hairs, and that's really nice. Okay, get down to the bottom, rinse my brush off, wipe it off, and suck up that last little bit of puddle. Okay, now I'm going to clean my brush off, and we're going to get a really bright, pretty blue for over here, doing square number 3. And if you're using the praying set, it's just your blue. Our ultramarine blue looks just like this. We have some people in different parts of the world, and I've been told that it's really difficult to find those praying brand watercolors. If you're in England, I know you can find Winsor Newton watercolor paints. I'm not sure what the other brands are, but that's from England, so I'm pretty sure you're able to find it there. But you can get even just the primary colors for the tubes and get a little palette like this and mix them in. So I have a nice juicy puddle over here of blue. Coming over here to square number 3, I'm going to draw the paint across the top and just going to drag this down. And when you're doing a color wheel, you want your colors to be as clear and pure to the color as you can. Dragging that down. Just like that. Get down to the bottom, wipe your brush off, and just sort of suck that puddle up. The dryness of the hairs, the water wants to absorb up inside there. So we're going to clean our brush off. And now those are the primary colors. Okay, so let's get into the secondary colors. Secondary colors are what you get if you mix these two. So we've got red and yellow. We're going to make our orange over here. So I'm going to use this red puddle here, and I'm just going to add some of this yellow right to it. Clean the brush off. And I want to get as true of a color of orange as I can. Now the problem with when you're mixing a puddle here is it's hard to gauge if that's actually orange because the puddle is going to be darker than what's underneath it. So take your brush, and on your sample paper you can test it. Okay? So you can gauge, is that a true orange? I think it looks pretty good, but the next question is do I have a big enough puddle? I think I picked up more red, so I'm going to add a little bit more yellow now. Let's add the praying yellow. Okay, that looks all right. Maybe a little bit more red. So you want to clean your brush off before dabbing into your different colored puddles, or pans. These are called pans. Okay, let's sample that. Yeah, that looks good. All right, so square number 4 is your orange. So when you mix red and yellow, you got orange. I'm dragging that. See this little puddle? That's the puddle I'm dragging around. And it's not very much there. Let's get more. This is why you want to make sure you have a big enough puddle mixed up. Okay, there we go. Wipe the brush off and suck up that puddle. Okay, now while I have this orange here, next we're going to get these two. What's in between yellow and blue? Green. So we're going to take some of this blue, ultramarine blue, and mix it with our yellow. You will learn by experience how much to add of one color because some colors are stronger than other colors. Red is a very strong color. It doesn't take very much red to alter your puddle. Blue is stronger than yellow. So just be aware of that when you're grabbing and dipping your brush into the blue. And if you do have phthalo green or viridian, don't use it because we're just going to stick with the primary colors here when we're mixing up the colors for the color wheel. So I have a pretty good green here. I think it's about as true a green as we're going to get mixing just the primary colors. Let's make that a little bit brighter though. It's kind of watered down grassy. Let's see what this does. That's better. Okay, so we're going to start at the top and drag that green puddle down. Just like that. Nice juicy puddle. All the way down. Like that. Wipe your brush off, suck up that puddle. Okay, and now I have the blue over here on my palette. You can kind of see that still. Get a nice big puddle going of that. And I'm going to add some red. Now these are both pretty strong colors, but red is stronger than blue, so it doesn't take as much red to turn this into violet. So let's see where we're at. Let's do a little bit more red. Try to balance that out and make a perfect purple. Okay, let's see where that is. Yeah, that looks good. So square number 6 is purple or violet. Okay, wipe your brush off and suck up that puddle if you have one. There's really not much of one on there. All right, now what we do is we go in between the colors now. So these were primary colors and these are called secondary colors. Now we're getting into tertiary colors. All right, so we've got our orange still here. We're going to add a little bit more red to that. Just a little bit. So it's about 2 parts red and 1 part yellow is how that tertiary works. Let's get a little bit more. All right, so start at the top and drag that puddle down. I think it needs a little bit more of the red in there, so start there. Just a little bit. Dragging that puddle down. Now you don't want to go back up and fiddle around with things after you've already done your wash. So just keep going down, get down to the bottom, wipe up that puddle. Now we're going to make this 2 parts yellow and 1 part red to do this one on this side. So let's check that. That's a lot of yellow and a little bit of red. Nice, dragging that puddle down. More. Okay, just like that. Get down to the bottom, wipe your brush off, and suck up that puddle. Okay, now we're going to get into this one. So I'm at my green pile down here. We're going to add a little bit more yellow. So that is still 2 parts yellow, 1 part blue. So we've got a little bit of blue still here. So we're going to add a lot of yellow to that and make it chartreuse. Just like that. Let's draw our line across the top and kind of start at this corner and drag that down. That's not very much water on there, is there? Just like that. Okay, get down to the bottom, wipe your brush off, and suck that up. All right, now we're gonna come over to this side and we're gonna do 2 parts blue, 1 part yellow. So right into this, we're gonna add a whole lot more blue and make it blue-green. That looks good. All right, start at the top and drag that puddle down. Okay, wipe the brush off and soak up that little bit of puddle. All right, now we're moving up to the violet side, so we're gonna do 2 parts blue and 1 part red. So we've got our violet over here. Into that, I'm gonna add a little bit more blue because that was a nice even mixture. And we want this to be sort of a violet, but just on the side of blue. So we start at the top and we drag that puddle down. Get some more paint on there, dragging that down. Getting in there nice and neat and tidy. Wipe the brush off and suck up the extra puddle. All right, now we're coming up to the reddish violet, and into this we're going to add a lot of red. And that gives us a maroon color. And just drag that puddle down. And so square number 12 is maroon, or red violet, or what have you. Dragging that puddle down. Nice flat wash. All right. So now what I want to show you is how to do some gradation. So I'm going to clean my palette off. So now I'm going to come back here to the red, and I'm going to do red, but I'm going to let this fade to get lighter right down to the middle. So starting with a nice, clean, bright puddle of red. I've got plenty of water on my brush and red. Now I'm going to jump into clean water during the process of painting this. So I start with bright red at the top. I want that really bright. Let's go bright red. Now, without going back into my puddle here, I'm going to rinse off my brush, just like that, and it's still a lot of water on there, but I'm going to take that puddle now and drag that down. Wipe that off, just like that. Now I'm going to clean my brush off, not going to get more color, and I'm just going to drag this, now it's almost clear, all the way down to the middle. And that's how we do a gradated wash. So let's come over here to yellow and let's do the same thing. Now I'm going to turn my paper so that it's vertical. Oops, we got to suck up that puddle. And this is why I do not advise inking first and then painting, because the ink wants to bleed. And I don't normally do that. I just did it for this demo so that you could see it better. All right, so let's get some nice bright yellow going here. Nice bright puddle. Draw your line across the top. Like that. Rinse it out. Nice clear water. Rinse it out, dry it, clear water, going right down to the middle. That's a gradated wash. Let's tip it over. Okay. ultramarine blue if you're using it by the tube. Nice, bright, strong color. Line across the top. Clean the brush off, wipe it off. Clean your brush off, wipe it off. And that's what you get. Clear all the way down to the middle. So those colors are all there blending. Now, what I want to show you here on the sides in these, I want to show you how to neutralize colors. So we're going to start out with a nice orange. We're going to start with this number 4, our orange. Okay, so if you make a nice orange and you want to neutralize it, you're going to add what we call its complement. Complementary colors are exactly across from each other on the wheel. So the opposite of orange is blue. So when I get down to this middle here, I will add more blue. And in between here, you'll see how by adding its opposite, its complement, you end up with sort of a brownish, more neutralized, earthy tone orange. So I've got my blue puddle here and I have my orange here. So as I'm working this way, here, let's turn it. So I always like to drag my washes down, and sometimes I have to turn my paper to do that. So we're coming down here to the middle. I'm going to rinse my brush off, grab my blue, and let the colors mix in the middle. See what happens? It turns to sort of a brown mixture. Okay, we're just going to let that puddle just end right there. All right, so let's see that with green. Opposite of green, red, Christmas colors. So we're going to start out with green. Let's get our nice green mixture going here again. Our blue and yellow. A nice strong green. And then halfway through, we're going to mix to red. So here's our green wash. Drag that down. Halfway through, rinse the brush off. You got to work quickly. And let's go right into red. Let those colors mix. So you can see how by mixing complementary colors, it turns into a really nice brown. This is how you can make brown with just the primary colors. Yeah, I'm getting down to the middle, so I'll clean that up. All right, now let's do purple and yellow. So we're going to start up here and do purple and fade to yellow. So I've got my red here. I'm just going to add some blue to that and make our purple again. And I'm going to make a puddle of yellow over here, just so we have it ready. All right, so start at the top. Drag that puddle down. And we're going to add some yellow halfway down. I found that purple and yellow gives you a really nice gray. Let's clean that up. We want some brighter yellow here. So when you're working on anything, and if you've got a color that's just too bright, you can neutralize it by adding its complement. All right, so what I want to do now in between these squares is I want to show you how to make browns and grays. Okay, so we're going to use our sample sheet for this too. So in this spectrum here, I'm going to show you how to make a warm brown. Now when I say warms, warm colors and cool colors. What that means is all of these colors on this side are warm. They make you feel like fire. You can remember that by the warmth that they create. And on this side, these are all your cool colors. So you can think of, you know, ice, cold, snow, whatever, is very blue tone. So when I say something is cool or something is warm, that's what I'm referring to. In this family, this color is, you know, if I say this yellow is very warm, that's what I'm referring to. So I'm starting out with an orange mixture here. And I'm going to add a little bit of blue right to this and show you how you can make a nice rich brown just from using those primary colors. Okay, so this is, let's make it a little bit more orange so that it makes sense that it's up in this venue here, the red family. That's a nice warm brown. And again, I'm working on my puddle, just dragging it down. Wipe your brush off and suck up that puddle. All right, so let's do another, using the same puddle here, we're going to add a little bit more yellow to it and see what we get. Maybe a more of a sienna type brown. I'm going to turn my color wheel. And again, that's just with a little bit more blue in that orange. It's almost a gold color, like a yellow ochre. Just like that. Get down to the bottom, wipe your brush off, suck up that puddle. Let's come up with a neutral greenish brown, almost like an olive. So we're going to take this green, and what's its complement? Well, this would be the complement of that. So let's add a little bit more of the brick red color. That's red with a little bit of blue into that olive green. And you'll have to practice off to the paper and off to the side and see if that's the right ratio. Sometimes you can get too much and it doesn't look right. I think I got too much of the blue and that in there, so let's add a little bit more red and yellow. Oops. There we go. I'm looking for an olive green. There we go. Dragging that puddle down. Just like that. All right, now I'm going to do a neutral, I don't have to turn it, a neutral blue-green for over here that has sort of an earthy tone to it. So mixing up a little bit more blue into that. What's its opposite? Sort of that rusty red. So let's add some of this over there. Oh, that's nice. Let's see. Start at the top. And drag that color down. These are colors that you would use all the time in plein air. It's just going to take you a little bit of experience and time to figure out the right ratio of how to dip your brush in to pick up color. But having a practice sheet, like you can set up a practice sheet and tape off a whole bunch of squares just to practice these. That's a great exercise. Now we're going to do this one, and I'd like to get sort of a neutral blue-gray. And I use that color all the time when I'm painting the ocean. So let's get a nice puddle of blue going. And what is its opposite over here? Sort of that rusty orange. So I want to add a little bit of that to this and some red. Let's add that to this blue. Oh, that's a perfect blue-gray like the ocean. Let's test that over here. Yeah, that looks good. All right. And again, I haven't used any prepackaged browns or purples or anything. I'm just using the 3 primary colors. So drag those puddles down. That's it for that one. All right, now we have this square left, or triangular shape, and let's get that. Let's do that as a nice neutrally purple, almost like a warm plum eggplant brick color. So again, we're just making, I'll use this puddle mixture here. We'll start with our purple base. And what's opposite? Green. So let's add a little bit of green to that. Maybe a little bit more red. Some green. Okay, that's a dusty, almost lavender. That's pretty. Let's do that. Get a little bit more in there. Let's make a point here to really show this. There we go, dragging that puddle down. There we go. Okay, all right, so to recap, we did the color wheel and we talked about primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. We talked about secondary colors, orange, green, and violet. Then tertiary colors are the red, orange, yellow, green, green, blue, blue, violet, and red, violet. And then we talked about how to gradate washes, starting with a strong color and fading to light in the primary colors. Then we took secondary colors and mixed them with the primary color. So we took our secondary colors, which were orange, green, and violet, and mixed them with the primary colors, blue, red, and yellow, to give us a neutral color in here. And then what we did is we talked about neutralizing different colors by adding the color across the wheel to complement it. So we came up with a lavender, an oceany blue, kind of some olive greens in here, and some rusty sienna type colors in here. So that is a great place to start for color theory. And this next session, we're going to talk more about different watercolor techniques. So I hope you enjoyed that, and that is a great beginning first class for watercolors. Next week, we're going to talk about transferring a drawing. We're going to transfer a drawing to your watercolor paper and paint it right in class. That'll be the whole session. And I will share the drawing that we're all going to work from during the week. All right, thank you so much. Bye.